Today's episode is presented by Lodestar, the fee experts.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Lodestar Lending Leaders Summer Session. This week, we're going to be talking about Michael Scott in our Office series. So is Michael Scott a good manager? That is the question we are striving to answer today. Mm-hmm. So, okay, opening thoughts. What do you think?
No. That's the short answer. I think there's things he does well, and then he's a great TV character, right? And obviously like a little bit of a caricature, but I think folks have probably had managers like him in some way, shape, or form. I think there's things he does well, but a lot that doesn't. And I honestly, a lot of the way I think about managing, especially someone who likes doing sales a lot, is my goal is to never become Michael Scott.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think Michael Scott is the perfect example of you get promoted until you can no longer do the job.
To your level of incompetence. Yeah.
And I think it sounds like he was an amazing salesperson.
Yep.
And they were like, oh, we'll make him a manager.
Which happens a lot too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 100%, the things that make you a great salesperson, a great ops person or whatever, don't necessarily make you a great leader. And I think he's a perfect example.
I mean, you see that with engineers too. Someone's a really good developer and a really good product engineer. Not necessarily a good manager, which is fine. And probably the people who are good managers aren't your best developers or salespeople, which is fine.
I mean, I tell people all the time, I was like, my salesperson is definitely at this point a better salesperson than me, I think. I feel pretty confident in saying that.
As they should be. Yeah.
But he sells every day and I don't. Yeah. You also just get out of practice and all
I
that.
think those are some moments of brilliance of Michael Scott when you see him having to save a deal. But you're seeing him, having to do like those types of things that are in his core competency and kind of what's redeeming about him as a character.
100%. I think very early on, there's the Lackawanna County deal that happens. It's one of the first times we ever see Jan. He goes out to the Chili's.
She's trying to ask things right away, right? Where he tells everyone to leave because he knows it's going to be long, but he also saves the account.
Yeah.
Right. Because he knows the person, his patience,
and for them, that's a huge sale that he just made, right? Continuing that contract and all of that. And he wouldn't have made that if he hadn't been willing to sit with the guy and really give him his time and all of that. And I think he's really good in those situations.
Right.
But then you can definitely see where he fails.
Yeah. Which, I mean, to be fair, is like what people think sales is in some cases, right?
Yeah.
That's...
most of the time it isn't.
Yeah, it's really not. But...
And I think there's some key things we can point to that he should have probably been fired multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, HR violations aside, right? The diversity training, I think his need to be the entertainer of the office, right? The need for attention and calling everyone into meetings constantly. His different characters, all of those things are ultimately a distraction. And sure, you can have a rapport with the people you manage, the people you work with, but I think the need to get the office to be his entire family, right, is the issue. Or the episode when he wanted everyone to find someone for him to
date.
Yeah,
that's concerning.
Great episode, but not great.
I definitely think there is a place for, I think, some of the stuff that he did right in the office, right, fun team buildings or stuff like that, right? I think those moments can make a team more cohesive and run a little bit more efficiently. But when you have them every day, they lose all meaning.
It's like having that emotional connection. And my favorite Michael Scott moment that I carry with me a lot, and you can say yours after so you can think about it while I talk about this, is when Pam has her first art show. Right. And he has that crappy presentation with Ryan where Ryan kind of doesn't make fun of the company, but he's very honest about it. Mike's doing his business thing. It doesn't go well. You kind of question him as a boss, as a manager. And then he goes and buys the painting from Pam, and a moment where she, kind of needs that support. She needs that pick me up. And then it goes right there in the office. Right. That is something that always stays with me because it's important to support people not only in their roles, but in those things outside, right? I was in a job 10, 12 years ago at this point, and I was it was when I did a boxing match as a fundraiser for charity. I emailed people at the company, and the manager of the company, who I did not think was a great manager, the first thing he did was buy a bunch of tickets and support that almost without question, right? And I will never forget that. Or your husband John. I thought of that. I have his album cover signed hanging in my office, and I think of that same Pam moment every time, right? Because it's fun. I really like his band, Garden Jazz. Please check it out, everyone. But also, it's just it means a lot to people when you go out and do those types of things too. And I think Michael does. Some part of him gets that.
Yeah, I think honestly, that's probably maybe his best moment as a manager. I think in the show, I think you're right there.
Which isn't great that that's his best moment, but
thing that's his best moment. I think he does have some good things. I think even though it was a huge waste of company time, I think Michael Scarn might be one of my favorite Michael moments because it does show how he was able to get the whole company together to do something. Even it's not work related, right? I can't say it was a great manager moment, but like, I think it is something that his people respected him enough to do that.
That's true.
I will say, that might be my favorite one actually. If we're talking manager moments, I think when he tells Stanley he has to respect him, right? Like he's like, you don't have to like me.
Yeah.
He has this very honest conversation with Stanley. Maybe the way he handled
Stanley's reaction after,
But like Stanley was like, I get that. Like I can't disrespect you in front of other employees. He's like, that makes fair. Like that's fair.
Yeah.
All of that. So I think that's actually, he handles that situation a little bit better, but only at the incessant pushing, right, of Toby. Right. Yeah. He tries to avoid the situation. He tries to avoid the conflict at all costs. I think
one of my favorite episodes when they're picking health insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And he just avoids that. He gives that to Dwight, who he knows is going to like very conflict avoidant.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what do you think of the other managers that come after Michael as we quickly wrap up? Do we think any of them are successful?
I mean, in the context of the show, not really. Right. Will Ferrell's character,
I really disliked him.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was super likable. Idris Elba, I love him as an actor. I don't know, like his character was just like not. They also made him like come in a way where he wasn't really relating to people, and he wasn't doing that. And ultimately, the person who's successful is Dwight at the end because he knows everyone. He's able to have that kind of mentality, and also make the tough decisions too, like firing Kevin.
Like firing Kevin.
And I did just realize last week too, we forgot to talk about Daryl.
Oh.
Who's, I guess in theory, a manager, right? And
Daryl is the manager. He manages the warehouse. Yeah.
I would probably hire Daryl.
I think Daryl's reliable.
Yeah. So honorable mention from last week, our hire and fires.
Yeah. And I actually do think Dwight's probably the best manager. I think he does a good job. I think he will do a good job, right? At the end of the day, because he cares a lot.
Right.
He cares about the company being successful and not just keeping people in roles to keep people in roles like Michael did. Because again, Kevin, I'm sorry, if your accountant can't do math, we have some problems.
Well, that's the thing. Like you can be friends with employees and have that. And I always bristle at like the idea of your work being your work family, right? And like there's some of that at a company for sure, but I think that's not like this is you don't like you can't fire your family, right? Like it's definitely a different mentality, and I think there's just too much of that in Michael's character, right? And he expects too much emotionally from everyone that he works with.
It's just a very unhealthy boundary.
Yeah.
And I think as managers, like I've hired people that I know outside of work and all of that, like this job, at past jobs, whatever. And I think it's really important. You have to ask yourself the question, am I comfortable firing this person? Because you have to acknowledge it could end up there at all times. Right. And I think as leaders, if you're not comfortable doing that, then you're putting yourself and that person in a really bad position.
Yeah.
And Michael put a lot of people in bad positions.
Right, I'm trying to think of who he even fires. I guess there's the person in like the very early on episode.
Oh, he lets Gavin or Devin go.
Oh yeah,
because he has to let someone go, and he waits until the end of the day on Halloween during their Halloween party to fire someone.
Yeah,
like you had a whole month.
Yeah,
you knew it was coming.
Yeah,
like Just
Yep.
don't be bad.
I was thinking of the other day, the one where I think when he was trying to avoid everyone because of the health insurance things, like, oh, busy day, got lots of meetings. Like, I was going from one meeting to another the other day, and I was like, oh, busy day, got lots of meetings, lot to do. Talk to you later.
Just don't want to select a health insurance plan.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, perfect. Well, I think that's everything for the most part to talk about Michael Scott. And then next week, we're going to talk about some of our favorite episodes, but also some of the things that we think we can take from as leaders, as well as just as employees from the office. So that'll be good. Awesome.
Great.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for joining in, and we'll see everyone next week.
It's good to talk to you all later.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Lodestar's Lending Leaders podcast. Please like, subscribe, and rate us 5 stars anywhere you get your podcast. A special thank you to the Lodestar podcast production team, Jim Paolino, Tim Austin, and John Gardner.